On July 4th, 2025, what should have been Independence Day celebrations in Texas Hill Country became one of America's deadliest flash flood disasters.
There's people screaming in the river. We're evacuating everybody. Oh my God.
By dawn, over 130 people were dead, hundreds missing, and an entire summer camp had vanished beneath a wall of water that rose 26 feet in just 45 minutes.
Stop! He needs to get out!
It happened fast, and it happened in the dark.
One word, catastrophic.
We're examining why this flood was so catastrophically deadly. This isn't just about bad weather, it's about a perfect storm of geography, failed systems, and climate change that created conditions for mass casualties. The question isn't just what happened that night. The question is, why were so many people caught completely off guard by something that killed with such swift and merciless efficiency? To understand why this flood was so deadly, we first need to understand where it happened. Texas Hill Country sits in what meteorologists grimly call Flash Flood Alley, a crescent-shaped region that stretches across central Texas. The geology itself is the problem. The area sits on limestone bedrock that doesn't absorb water. Rain hits it like water hitting concrete. Add steep hills and narrow valleys that act like funnels, and you have a natural death trap. The Guadalupe River system, where most of the deaths occurred, is particularly dangerous because two main forks converge near Hunt, Texas, creating a bottleneck that concentrates water flow. But July 4th was even worse. Kerr County was experiencing severe drought. The ground was baked hard, unable to absorb any rainfall. When the deluge hit, virtually every drop became immediate surface runoff. The geography had set a trap. All it needed was the right weather to spring it. What hit Texas wasn't just a storm, it was a mesoscale convective vortex, a 30-mile-wide spinning system that sucked moisture from the Gulf of Mexico and hurled it inland like a fire hose.
There's people in it. Oh my God, there's so many people in it. Please don't get this video. Yeah, it's over.
The real killer was training thunderstorms, multiple storms that pounded the exact same areas for hours, like freight cars on a track. The numbers are staggering. 1.8 trillion gallons of water fell in just hours. 4 months of normal rainfall in a single night. Some areas recorded 12 inches per hour, rates so extreme that weather models couldn't predict them. The National Weather Service forecast 3 to 5 inches. Some areas got 18 inches. This created a wall of water that transformed the peaceful Guadalupe River into a 30-foot torrent in under an hour. And it struck between midnight and 4 a.m., when people were asleep and escape was nearly impossible. Here's where tragedy becomes infuriating. The death toll was amplified by catastrophic human failures. The warning timeline tells the story. 1:14 a.m., first flood warning called risk considerable, no evacuation mentioned. 3:35 a.m., second alert, still no evacuation order. 4:03 a.m., finally urged people to seek higher ground, but the river had already risen 26 feet. At Camp Mystic, where 27 died, survivors weren't awakened by sirens. They were awakened by water reaching the second floor of their cabins. Why no sirens? Local officials had tried 3 times to get funding for emergency warning systems. Each time they were denied, or couldn't afford the terms. The county had even published a 220-page emergency plan, identifying flood risk and recommending sirens. They knew this could happen, but couldn't get the resources to prevent it. The National Weather Service was operating with critical staff shortages. Key positions, senior hydrologists, warning coordination meteorologists, were vacant due to budget cuts. When disaster struck, the people whose job was to coordinate emergency response simply weren't there.
My birds are gone.
Most tragically, many deaths occurred in areas FEMA had removed from flood maps. Camp Mystic had buildings originally designated as being in the floodway, the most dangerous flood zone, but they'd been removed from official maps, creating false security. Every system designed to protect people had failed.
County Road 4330. So County Road 4330 is flooded out.
We must address climate change's role. While Texas Hill Country is always flooded, July 4th represents something new and more dangerous.
Is climate change making these events more frequent?
Yeah, so in terms of climate science, it's really based on the principles of physics, right? And so the principles of physics say when the atmosphere warms up, as is happening with climate change, a warmer atmosphere can hold more moisture than a colder atmosphere, right? A consequence of that is going to be, all other things being equal, you'll have more intense and more frequent large rainfall events, right? And so the large amount of rain that we had last week.
Climate scientists explain it simply. The atmosphere is like a sponge that gets bigger as temperatures rise. For every degree of warming, the atmosphere holds 7% more water vapor. This doesn't mean more frequent rain, but when it does rain, the potential for extreme downpours increases dramatically. The Gulf of Mexico, running above average temperatures for months, fed extra moisture into the storm system. Dr. Daniel Swain at UCLA is clear. Extreme precipitation events are becoming more intense, and historically rare events now happen more frequently.
So as we see more of these events because of that extreme heat and extreme precipitation that you talk about, should we just expect these things that we like to call historic to be no longer historic, and that these sort of deadly storms could happen more frequently?
So we are already seeing in parts of the United States and in general around the world that the most extreme precipitation events, the heaviest downpours, are becoming even more intense. And extreme rain events and flash flood events that perhaps were rare historically are now happening more often. And we're also seeing events that exceed, in some cases, anything that we've seen historically. And that's not to say that this region, for example in Texas, has not seen severe floods before. In fact, it is at the heart of what is colloquially known by meteorologists as Flash Flood Alley, which suggests
we're seeing floods that exceed anything in the historical record. This makes storms not just stronger but more unpredictable. Weather models based on historical data become less reliable when climate is changing rapidly. That's why forecasters predicted 5 inches but got 18. Climate change didn't cause the floods, but it loaded the dice, making an already dangerous situation exponentially more deadly.
I bet. Probably.
It was the convergence of multiple deadly factors. Geography created the trap. Limestone bedrock, steep terrain, and drought-hardened soil ensured all rainfall became concentrated runoff. Meteorology sprung the trap. A rare weather system enhanced by climate change created unprecedented rainfall rates. Timing made escape impossible. The worst flooding hit between midnight and 4 a.m. when people were asleep. System failures eliminated protection. Warning systems gave minutes instead of hours of notice. Emergency sirens didn't exist, and critical weather service positions were vacant. False security increased vulnerability. Flood maps that removed buildings from high-risk zones may have created dangerous complacency. Climate change acted as an accelerant, making everything exponentially worse. Each factor alone might have caused flooding. Together, they created a disaster that killed with swift, merciless efficiency. The Texas floods were deadly because they represented the worst possible convergence. Dangerous geography, extreme weather, failed systems, and climate change amplification. Most tragically, much of the death toll was preventable. Not the weather, but better warning system, adequate staffing, and honest flood mapping could have saved lives. As climate change continues to intensify extreme weather events, the lessons from Texas Hill Country become critical for communities across America. Because while we can't control the weather, we can control how prepared we are to face it. The question isn't whether events like this will happen again. Climate scientists are clear, they will. The question is whether we'll learn from the deadly convergence that claimed so many lives on what should have been a day of celebration. The victims of the Texas floods deserve nothing less than our commitment to ensuring that such a preventable tragedy never happens again.
Cat.